Clean lines, absence of excess, minimization of interface, uncluttered. Those are the words that people use to describe minimalism. Or dare I say, those are the words people use to market minimalism. These adjectives and phrases used to describe minimalism are objectively true, which may make them seem as an answer to a problem, which it is, or was, but it's just as true that you lose out on identity, character, semiotics, ergonomics, and tragically, sometimes even functionality. Now, I know what you're thinking. Here comes another guy with a bone to pick, with clean lines and white walls. And you're right, except that my bone isn't just picked, it's been filleted, sauteed, and served back to me for $89. Let's talk about how minimalism, as a style, isn't just overrated, but also a scam. If you like the topic I'm discussing and if you would like to see more videos regarding similar topics, be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, just do something. It started off innocently enough, as an answer to cope with the damage and destruction left by the First World War. It was about rebuilding infrastructure as quickly as possible with the least amount of material and labor and time involved. Yes, the cleanliness was novel and aesthetic, and it took a lot of takers. It was an entire movement. But this was the period of modernism. Minimalism came a little bit later. Minimalism is about living with less. Less what though? Less color, less joy, less furniture, and possibly the most ignored aspect of it all. Would that make you happy? In design, minimalism means stripping things down to their essence. No decoration, no fluff, just form following function, which is great if you're designing something that is intentionally built to a cost. But when things or designs are stripped away to a point where they hamper functionality or safety, even, it becomes a matter of good aesthetic at the cost of bad design. Minimalism saw its most recent resurgence around 2008 when two things had happened. In tech, as an aspect, the iPhone was just launched a year before, which touted itself very credibly as a modern, sleek, minimalist design. But in 2008, the financial market crashed. And after that, minimalism was no longer just a statement. Companies, organizations, businesses didn't have a choice. But it was convenient for brands. Brands could now design products that cost lesser to make. And it didn't really matter if they were less functional or devoid of the same depth of thought or innovation, because this was an all new trend happening. And sooner or later, they would begin to charge a premium for their complacency. Origins. This is something I've discussed before. I'll link the video with this. Minimalism came a little while after modernism. It was an extension of modernism, which ironically came after maximalism. While the world was enjoying shag carpets and loud, unnecessarily full music and fondue sets, a bunch of artists came together and said, what if we just don't? And so we got paintings of white squares, sculptures that look like unfinished drywall, and buildings that resemble concrete filing cabinets. Architect Mies van der Rohe famously said, less is more. And we all nodded because it sounded smart. But if you think about it, it's the same as saying that hunger is nourishment, which I'm sure is true in a context or another, but not necessarily in its literal sense. Now, why did this cold, joyless aesthetic become the gold standard for modern living? One word: guilt. Far too many people have more things than they have any use for. We like to hoard, it is human tendency. So, when something like minimalism comes along, promising spiritual cleansing through getting rid of what you don't need, it ultimately snowballs into empty walls and monochromatic bed sheets. I have a monochromatic bedsheet. Also, tech billionaires made it cool. You got Steve Jobs, who used to wear the same kind of turtleneck every single day, which I mean, like, yeah, it worked for him. He saved, I'm sure, the few minutes a day. And just because someone successful did it, we will call it inspirational. Cases in favor. Of course, minimalism can be helpful. Fewer things means less clutter, fewer distraction, fewer things to deal with or maintain or look for. Clean lines, clean mind. You save a lot of time in things like, again, what to wear. And as a statement, minimalism is really powerful. It looks sleek and futuristic and purposeful. It's like something out of a Bond villain's lair. But that's the thing, it works for Bond villains. For the rest of us, it looks like we're living in Google's data centers. Now, here's where things get scammy. They took minimalism and turned it into a premium lifestyle brand. You're not just living with less, you're paying a premium for it. Like, here are fewer things, and we'll take more money from you to give it to you. You know, a minimalist chair, $1,500. A hand thrown minimalist mug that can't hold more than 3 sips of coffee, $80. Sure. Minimalist fashion, that's called style. There's a case to be made that minimalism isn't about having less, it's about signaling having more in terms of more taste or more sophistication, more discipline. It says, I'm better than you because I don't need a lot of things, except that I'll pay more money for it and capitalism. And the idea was sold to you by the same people who told you to declutter your life, get rid of things you don't need, and you got rid of $200 for the privilege. Here's what nobody really talks about: the unintended side effects of the so called purity. Anxiety. Living in a sterile, empty box makes you feel like the universe is really ordered and perfect, which works until your mental sense of being notices a dissonance. If everything around you is clean and proper and ordered and perfect, you would compare your environment to your state of mind and go crazy. Then you have things like paralysis that, hey, I can't buy this lamp that I need because then I would have a lamp and I'm not always going to use it. And even if you are going to use it, the fact that it exists simply isn't minimalist enough. And even if it suits the aesthetic, and then there's the pretense that everyone who has maybe a carpet is beneath you. Here's one thing that the marketing teams really enjoy: you throw everything out because you think you don't need anything, you become a minimalist, and then you realize you need some of that stuff back, and you go shopping and buy something that looks minimalist. Minimalists love rules, own only what sparks joy, no bold colors, everything must be made out of ash or concrete. There are cultures through history that did love concrete. I mean, look at Soviet architecture, for example. Brutalism. They proved an extremely valid point, though the romanticism of it began to lie not in the idea, but in the decay. It would be irresponsible to dismiss the plausible foreshadowing of what's happening now. Minimalists obviously judge you silently, minimally. You walk into their home with a shopping bag, they're going to behave like you just kicked over their bonsai tree. Look, I'm not saying I don't live like a hoarder. I have been guilty of the crime. And when it comes to minimalism, I have maybe a version of it going on. It's not crazy, let's get rid of everything. I'm not saying live like a hoarder. In fact, I'm definitely not saying live like a hoarder. In fact, I would say I am definitely saying do not live like a hoarder. That comes with its own set of problems. I'm saying moderation. Remember that one? Balance, texture, stories, cultural influences, whatever. A splash of red somewhere doesn't mean that you're emotionally unstable. Instead of less is more or more is more, how about just the right amount is the right amount? And just the right amount is what you need and probably some of what you want. Less is less, and more is excess that you may or may not have the space or even money for. Minimalism has good intentions, had good intentions. But for any trend that gets swallowed by capitalism and turned into a marketing gimmick, it gets hollowed out and served back to us with a 400% markup. It's not about simplicity anymore. It's about status. Well, the status of you that you would want to be perceived and not your actual status. It's about pretending that you have transcended the realm of needing more, which is ironic because you just bought superly expensive lamp that's made out of recycled tears. So is minimalism a scam? Well, it wasn't, but now it is. Tastefully curated and an emotionally oppressed one more like. And like all good scams, it makes you feel smarter and better than everyone else while you're quietly being robbed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, how about you leave a minimal dot in the comments below?